"I'll give you 100 million if you open the safe." The millionaire chuckled, looking at the boy in his threadbare sneakers. He didn't know he was betting against the wrong person and that he would lose everything. "Get out of the way. Important people need to pass." Robert Sterling shouted at Ethan, who was wiping the lobby floor with a worn, frayed cloth. The boy looked up, his dark eyes filled with concentration, and quickly moved aside, muttering an almost inaudible "Sorry, sir." Ethan was barely 11 years old, but he already carried on his small shoulders the weight of a responsibility no child should have. His hands, chapped from water and cleaning products, worked tirelessly from early morning. The knees of his pants showed patches mended by his mother, Sarah, who sewed every night, trying to maintain her son's dignity despite the poverty that surrounded them. Robert Sterling was the owner of Sterling Holdings, one of the largest corporations in Toronto. At 45, he had built an empire based on real estate and technology. He wore watches that cost more than a new car and imported ties that were worth a month's salary for any of his employees. For him, people like Ethan were simply part of the furniture, objects that had to be present but never visible. "Emily," he called to his secretary as he entered the main office. "How many times do I have to tell the cleaning staff not to get in the way when I arrive?" Emily Carter was 32 and had been working for Robert for 6 years. She had learned to navigate his explosive temper and hurtful comments. "Mr. Sterling, the boy was just doing his job. He arrives at 6 a.m. to clean before the employees get here, and why should I care?" Robert replied with disdain, dropping his leather briefcase onto the desk. "I'm not interested in his story. I just want him to do his job without me having to see him." What Robert didn't know was that Ethan wasn't an employee of the cleaning company. He was the son of Sarah, who had worked there for 3 years. Sarah was 35 and the sole provider for her household since David, her husband, had suffered an accident that left him unable to do heavy work. David now sold handmade crafts online and at local markets, earning barely enough to buy his medications. Ethan accompanied his mother every morning because they had no one to leave him with. School had taken a back seat when his father's medical expenses consumed all their savings. But the boy didn't just sit around waiting. He helped his mother with the cleaning tasks, carried water buckets, organized products, swept hallways, all with a dedication that contradicted his young age. "Mom," Ethan whispered, when Sarah appeared with her cleaning cart, "that man is angry again." Sarah looked toward Robert's office and sighed. "Don't worry, my love. We just have to do our job well and stay out of trouble. Why does he treat us like that? We haven't done anything wrong to him. Some people, Ethan, haven't learned that everyone deserves respect. But that doesn't mean we should be like them. Do you understand?" The boy nodded, though in his eyes there was a spark of something more. It wasn't resentment exactly, but a silent determination that Sarah recognized, because it was the same one she had when she decided never to give up despite the circumstances. The day proceeded normally until a special messenger arrived at noon. He carried a large, heavy package, sealed with several security padlocks, and marked confidential everywhere. "Delivery for Mr. Robert Sterling," the messenger announced at reception. Emily signed the receipt documents and personally took the package to Robert's office. It was a portable silver safe with a sophisticated electronic panel on the front. Along with it came an envelope with documentation. "What on earth is this?" Robert asked as he opened the envelope. His expression changed from confusion to absolute surprise as he read. According to the documents, the safe contained bearer bonds worth 100 million Canadian dollars. It was part of an unexpected inheritance from a distant uncle who had died without leaving a specific will. Robert had been located as one of the potential heirs, but there was a strange condition. The safe had a unique security mechanism. It required solving a series of mathematical and logical puzzles to open it, without a digital password or traditional combination. If anyone tried to force it open, it would self-destruct along with its contents. The challenge was deliberate, designed by the eccentric uncle, who believed that only someone truly intelligent deserved the inheritance. "This is ridiculous," Robert murmured as he examined the panel. There were numbers, mathematical symbols, and what appeared to be a complex equation that changed every time he touched a button. He called his executive team. 3 men arrived quickly, all in expensive suits and with impressive university degrees. For an hour, they tried to decipher the mechanism. They tested different combinations, searched for patterns, consulted the internet. Nothing worked. "There has to be a way," Robert said repeatedly, pounding the desk in frustration. $100 million can't just be locked in there with no way to get them out. "Sir," one of the executives suggested, Why don't we call a safe expert? I already tried, Robert replied. The manufacturer says it's a custom model, unique in the world. They don't have the tools to open it without destroying it. The news spread throughout the building like wildfire. Employees from all departments commented on the mysterious safe and the fortune it contained. Some discreetly approached Robert's office, offering ideas that were immediately rejected. Do you think I'm stupid? He yelled at them. I've already tried all those basic options. This requires more than simple math. Ethan, meanwhile, had heard part of the conversation while cleaning the hallway near the office. His natural curiosity led him to get a little closer when Robert temporarily stepped out for coffee. Through the slightly ajar door, he could see the safe on the desk. The panel showed a sequence of numbers that seemed to change following some kind of pattern. Ethan, who before leaving school had shown exceptional talent for mathematics, felt something familiar in those numbers. It was like the puzzles his teacher gave him when he could still attend classes. Hey, you! A voice startled him. It was one of the executives who had seen the boy looking inside. What are you doing standing there? Don't you have work to do? Sorry, sir. Ethan replied, lowering his gaze and quickly moving away with his rag in hand. But his mind kept processing what he had seen. Prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, maybe something related to geometry. His brain worked automatically on the problem, even as he swept the floor. Robert returned to his office, growing increasingly frustrated. Several hours had passed, and none of his highly paid executives had been able to solve the puzzle. His pride was wounded. How was it possible that he, a successful businessman, couldn't access his own inheritance? This is humiliating, he muttered as his employees watched in silence. All of you with your master's degrees and diplomas, and none of you can solve a simple riddle. Emily, who had been observing everything from her desk, dared to suggest, Mr. Sterling, perhaps we should rest for a moment. Sometimes, solutions come when we stop forcing them. Rest? Robert looked at her in disbelief. $100 million are in there, and you suggest I rest? Frustration reached a critical point when the last of his executives admitted to being completely lost. Robert, in a fit of anger mixed with desperation, made a decision that would change everything. He walked out of his office and into the common area where several employees had gathered, commenting on the situation. His presence silenced everyone immediately. Listen, everyone, he said in a loud, clear voice, making sure everyone on the floor could hear him. I have a safe in my office that contains $100 million. None of my executives have been able to open it, so here's my offer. He paused dramatically, enjoying the total attention he had. I'll give $1 million to anyone who can open it. $1 million. Cold, hard cash. The reaction was immediate. Employees began to murmur excitedly, some already planning how they would spend that money. Robert smiled with satisfaction, thinking he had found the perfect solution. But then he saw Ethan standing in a corner with his rag in hand, silently observing everything. And in that moment of absolute arrogance, Robert decided to turn his offer into a cruel spectacle. In fact, he said, raising his voice even more, I'll extend the offer. If even this child can open it, he pointed directly at Ethan. I'll give him $100 million. The full $100 million. The office erupted in laughter. It was obvious that Robert was making a cruel joke, mocking the idea that a poor, grubby child could achieve what educated executives had failed to do. Imagine, Robert continued, feeding off the laughter, a cleaning boy solving what mathematicians couldn't. It would be the joke of the century. Sarah, who had heard everything from where she was cleaning the windows, felt her heart clench. She wanted to run to her son, protect him from that public humiliation. But Ethan looked at her and nodded, as if to say it was okay. Sir, Ethan spoke in a clear but respectful voice, surprising everyone. Are you serious? Robert looked at him with a mixture of amusement and disdain. Of course I'm serious, kid. If you can open that safe, I'll give you everything inside. $100 million. And if you can't, then you keep cleaning floors as you should be. Robert responded with a cruel smile. Do you accept the deal? Ethan looked at his mother, who had tears in her eyes, but nodded almost imperceptibly. The boy knew this could be the greatest humiliation of his life, but he also knew something no one else in that room knew. He had seen the pattern in those numbers and believed he could solve it. I accept, Ethan said in a firm voice. The office exploded in a mix of laughter and mocking comments. Employees took out their phones to record what they were sure would be an embarrassing moment to remember. Robert practically laughed in the child's face. Perfect, he exclaimed. I'm going to enjoy this. Emily, bring the boy into my office. Let's watch this spectacle. As Ethan walked toward the office, his small hands clutched the rag he had been using. His heart beat rapidly, but not from fear. It was excitement. mixed with determination. He had spent so long being invisible, being treated as if he didn't matter. Now he had the chance to prove that intelligence has nothing to do with the money you have or the clothes you wear. Robert didn't know he was about to receive the most expensive and humiliating lesson of his life, that the child in threadbare sneakers he had despised was about to change everything. The bet had been made, and nothing would ever be the same. Robert's office had turned into a circus. Employees crowded at the door, craning their necks to get a better look, while others recorded with their phones from every possible angle. The scene was so absurd that no one wanted to miss it. A child in threadbare shoes and patched clothes, facing a high-tech safe that had defeated executives with university degrees. "Make way for the genius," Robert said with sarcasm, making an exaggerated gesture for Ethan to approach the desk. "We don't want him to be distracted while he performs his magic." Laughter filled the room. Ethan walked slowly, feeling the weight of all those eyes on him. Emily watched from her desk with an expression that mixed pity and curiosity. Sarah had stayed in the hallway, unable to enter, but also unable to leave. "Well, maestro," Robert continued, crossing his arms as he leaned back in his leather chair, "you have all the time in the world, although I suppose cleaning floors hasn't given you much experience with advanced technology." Ethan stood in front of the safe, ignoring the comments, his eyes fixed on the electronic panel. Numbers danced on the screen: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17. It was exactly what he had thought, a sequence of prime numbers. But it didn't end there. "Given up already?" one of the executives asked from the door. "There's no shame in admitting this is too much for you." Ethan didn't respond. His small finger, still with traces of dirt under the nails despite having washed his hands, gently touched the screen. The numbers changed. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, Fibonacci. His old math teacher had taught him that sequence when he still attended school. "He's just pressing random buttons," someone scoffed. "This is going to end badly." But Emily, who had a better view of the panel, noticed something different. The boy wasn't pressing buttons randomly. His movements were deliberate, calculated. There was a pattern in what he was doing. Robert also began to notice. His mocking smile faded slightly when he saw the absolute concentration on Ethan's face. It wasn't the expression of someone lost and confused. It was the expression of someone solving a problem they understood. "Wait a minute." Robert leaned forward. "You actually know what you're doing?" Ethan didn't answer. His eyes moved between different sections of the panel, identifying intertwining patterns. It wasn't just one sequence, but several working simultaneously. Prime numbers in one column, Fibonacci in another, and something else in the third that took him a moment to recognize. "Perfect squares," he murmured to himself. "I, S, Jo, Shiliu, Arshawu, Sanshiliu." In his mind, Ethan went back to afternoons in his old school, when Mr. Harrison would stay after class to teach him mathematical puzzles. "Mathematics is the universal language, Ethan," he would say. "It doesn't matter where you come from or what clothes you wear, numbers don't discriminate." That teacher had seen something special in him. He had filled out scholarship applications. He had talked to private school principals, but then David's accident came, and all that had to take a back seat. "Hey," Robert's voice brought him out of his thoughts. "I asked you a question. Do you know what you're doing? Or are you just wasting my time?" "I'm working on it, sir," Ethan replied without looking up from the panel. Robert let out a short, nervous laugh. For the first time since he had launched his cruel bet, he felt a small pang of uneasiness. Surely the child couldn't really. It wasn't impossible. It was just a stroke of luck that he had identified some basic sequences. Ethan pressed a series of numbers in specific order. The panel emitted a soft sound, different from the error beeps it had been making when the executives tried. It was a confirmation tone. "What was that?" one of the employees asked. "Nothing. Probably another error," Robert replied, though his voice sounded less confident than before. Emily moved a little closer, fascinated. She had worked in that office long enough to recognize when Robert was nervous, and he was now. His foot tapped the floor repeatedly, a tick that only appeared when something made him anxious. Ethan continued working. The panel now showed a new layer of complexity. Geometric symbols, triangles, circles, squares, each with a number inside. It was a puzzle within a puzzle. "This is ridiculous." Robert stood up from his chair. "It's been 10 minutes already. Admit you have no idea what you're doing, and let's end this." "Let him try," Emily said softly. "You yourself gave him all the time he needed." Robert looked at her in surprise. Emily never openly contradicted him, especially not in front of other employees, but there was something about the situation that had compelled her to defend the child. "Whatever." Robert sat back down, crossing his legs irritably. "But this is a waste of time. Ethan blocked out all the noise around him. The murmurs, the muffled laughter, the sarcastic comments. He focused solely on the panel. The geometric symbols corresponded to the numbers in specific ways. The triangle was 3 sides, the square 4. The circle represented infinity, or perhaps 0. He pressed the sequence: circle, triangle, triangle, square, triangle. Following the pattern he had identified, another confirmation tone resonated from the safe. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the people who had been laughing fell silent. Everyone had heard that distinct sound. "What's happening?" someone asked from the back. Robert stood up so fast that his chair rolled backward. "No way. It's impossible." But the panel was changing. The red lights that had been blinking began to turn yellow. Ethan had overcome 2 security levels. Only one more remained. "Pure luck," Robert said, but his voice trembled slightly. "There's no way, a child." He stopped when he saw what appeared on the panel. The final phase was not pure mathematics. It was a logic puzzle combined with sequences. It required not only understanding numbers but thinking abstractly, connecting seemingly unrelated patterns. Ethan read the riddle on the screen. Juan's father has 3 children. The first is named Monday, the second is named Tuesday. What is the third one named? It was deceptively simple. Most people would say Wednesday, following the pattern of the days of the week, but Ethan smiled slightly. The answer was in the question itself. "One," he said softly as he typed the name into the panel. The safe emitted a series of mechanical clicks. The yellow lights turned green. The panel displayed a message, a CCESS, granted. The room fell into a deathly silence. "No," Robert whispered, the blood draining from his face. "No, no, no." Ethan took a step back, looking at the safe, which now showed its lock released. He didn't open it, didn't touch anything else, simply turned to Robert. "I solved it, sir," he said in a calm voice. "You can verify it." Robert approached the safe as if in a trance. His hands trembled as he touched the handle. The door opened smoothly, revealing the interior filled with bearer bonds, exactly as the document stated, $100 million in negotiable certificates. The silence was broken by the sound of someone dropping their phone, then another. The employees who had been recording everything were so shocked they forgot to hold their devices. "He did it," Emily whispered, putting a hand over her mouth. "He really did it." Robert stared at the inside of the safe, his brain unable to process what had just happened. The child he had publicly humiliated, the child he had mocked, the child he had treated as invisible for months, had just solved a riddle that even his highest-paid executives couldn't decipher. "This is a trick," he finally said, his voice sounding hollow. Someone told him the answers. "It has to be." "Mr. Sterling," Emily spoke firmly, "we were all here. Nobody told him anything. The boy solved it by himself. Then it was luck. Pure blind luck." "Luck on 3 different levels of puzzles?" asked one of the employees who had been watching closely. "Each level required different reasoning." "That's not luck." Ethan remained still, watching Robert crumble. He felt neither joy nor satisfaction, only a deep sadness at seeing an adult refuse to accept reality. Sarah finally entered the office, tears streaming down her cheeks. She knelt beside her son and hugged him tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered in his ear. "Mom, did I really do it?" Ethan asked, as if barely processing what had happened. "You did, my love, you did." Robert watched them, his mind racing at 1,000 miles per hour. He had made that bet in front of dozens of witnesses. Many of them had recorded it on video. He couldn't retract now without completely destroying his reputation. "This doesn't count," he said desperately. "It was a joke. Nobody takes those kinds of bets seriously." "You said you were serious," Ink replied, looking him directly in the eyes. "I asked you twice, and you confirmed. You're a child. Contracts with minors aren't always valid, but public promises certainly are," Emily interjected, "especially when there's video evidence." Robert looked at her with betrayal. "Whose side are you on?" "The side of what's right," she responded without hesitation. "You made a public bet. The boy fulfilled his part. Now it's your turn to fulfill yours." Employees began to murmur among themselves. Some took out their phones again, this time not to record, but to review the videos they had taken. The evidence was there, clear and undeniable. Robert slumped into his chair, burying his face in his hands. $100 million. It was more than some of his businesses made in a year. It was not an amount he could easily ignore or replace. "I need to talk to my lawyers," he finally said. "This can't be legal." "Mr. Sterling," said Mr. Douglas Thompson, the senior accountant of the company, who had been observing from the back of the room. He was a 60-year-old man, respected by all, with an unimpeachable reputation for integrity. With all due respect, you made a public bet, and the boy won it fair and square. You too, Douglas? Everyone's going to turn against me. It's not turning against you, it's recognizing the facts. If you try to back out now, you'll lose something much more valuable than money. Your word. Robert looked up, looking around the room. All his employees watched him with a mixture of disappointment and expectation. He knew Mr. Thompson was right. If he didn't keep his word, he would never have credibility in the business world again. "Give me time to think," he finally said. I need to process it. "Take all the time you need." Sarah spoke for the first time, her voice firm despite the tears. "But my son fulfilled his part of the deal. We hope you will do the same." Mother and son withdrew from the office, followed by the stares of everyone present. When they left, conversations exploded. Employees debated what had just happened, about the implications, about how incredible it had been to witness that moment. Emily approached Robert, who remained motionless in his chair. "Sir, you need to make a decision soon. This is already being shared on social media." "What?" Several employees uploaded the videos. There are already thousands of views. People are asking what's going to happen if you're going to keep your promise. Robert felt as if the world was collapsing around him. Not only had he lost an impossible bet, but now it was public. Thousands of people were watching, waiting to see what kind of man he really was. Mr. Thompson stayed after everyone else had left. "Robert," he said, using his first name for the first time in years. "I know that boy and his mother. They've been working here for a while. They are good people who have gone through very difficult situations. And what does that matter? It matters because you have the opportunity to do something extraordinary, not just keep a promise, but change lives. Or you can be the man who humiliated a child and then denied him what he earned." Rightfully so. Robert didn't respond. He sat in his empty office, looking at the open safe, processing that an 11-year-old boy had just taught him the most humiliating lesson of his life. Outside, in the hallway, Ethan hugged his mother as she cried from a mix of pride, fear, and hope. The bet had been won, but the real test had just begun. Night had fallen over the city when Sarah and Ethan finally arrived at their small apartment in the outskirts. The bus ride had been silent. Both were still processing what had occurred. The cool night air contrasted with the suffocating heat Ethan had felt in that office full of stairs. David was waiting at the door, his face showing a mixture of concern and curiosity. He leaned on his cane, his right leg barely supporting his weight. "What happened?" "I got messages saying there were videos of Ethan online." Sarah hugged her husband, and for the first time since leaving the office, she allowed herself to cry without restraint. They weren't tears of sadness, but of an emotion so intense it needed to escape somehow. "Dad," Ethan spoke in a small voice, "I solved a puzzle that no one could solve." "What kind of puzzle?" "One that's worth $100 million. David looked at his wife, seeking confirmation. Sarah nodded, still unable to form coherent words. The father sank into the only chair they had in the tiny living room, the creak of the old wood echoing in the silence. "Tell me everything," he finally said. As Ethan recounted the day's events, his voice gained confidence. He spoke about prime numbers, about Fibonacci, about Juan's riddle. David listened, his eyes widening, recognizing in his son something that had always been there, but which circumstances had prevented them from cultivating. "I always knew you were special," David said when Ethan finished, his own tears beginning to form. "Your teacher, Mr. Harrison, used to tell me every time I saw him, this child is going to be someone great. But Dad, Mr. Sterling doesn't want to pay. He says it was a joke." "Then he's not a man of his word," David replied with a firmness that surprised them both. Despite his physical condition, his voice carried the authority of someone who had worked with dignity all his life. But the truth always comes out. What none of them knew was that at that very moment, the truth was exploding online in ways they couldn't imagine. In his luxurious downtown penthouse, Robert Sterling couldn't sleep. The panoramic view of the city lights, which normally filled him with satisfaction, now seemed to mock him. Every illuminated window was like an eye judging him. His phone hadn't stopped ringing for hours. Calls from business partners, messages from his family, incessant social media notifications. He had tried to turn it off, but the anxiety of not knowing what was happening was worse than facing reality. Finally, at 2 a.m., he gave in and opened his phone. What he saw left him cold. The video had exploded. Not thousands of views, as Emily had mentioned, but millions. The clip where he made the cruel bet with Ethan had been watched over 3 million times. The video of Ethan opening the safe, 5 million. The comments were devastating. This man is the definition of cruelty. That kid is a genius, and this guy just wants to humiliate him. If he doesn't keep his promise, he should go to jail. Does anyone know where this man works? We need to get justice. Robert felt cold sweat running down his back. This was not just a personal reputation problem. It was a crisis that could destroy everything he had built. He dialed his lawyer's number, ignoring the time. Arthur Reed, his legal counsel for 15 years, answered with a sleepy voice. Robert, it's 2 a.m. Arthur, this is an emergency. Did you see the videos? A long sigh from the other end of the line. I saw them. The whole country saw them. I need legal options. There has to be some way to annul this. Robert, listen to me carefully. Arthur's voice lost all trace of sleep and became serious. Technically, a public verbal bet witnessed, and with video evidence, carries legal weight, especially when both parties fulfilled their part of the agreement. Both parties? He's a child who did exactly what you asked. He opened the safe. You promised $100 million if he did. There are witnesses, there's video, there's proof. Robert walked to the window, looking at the sleeping city below. So, what do you recommend? As your lawyer, I tell you that paying is the least damaging option. As your friend, I tell you it's the right thing to do. $100 million, Arthur. That's not pocket change. I know, but the cost of not paying will be much greater. There are already online petitions calling for a boycott of your company, clients asking if they want to do business with someone like that. Your reputation is worth more than $100 million. Robert hung up without saying goodbye, something he had never done before. The glass wall in front of him reflected a man he didn't recognize, disheveled, with dark circles under his eyes, defeated. His phone vibrated again. This time it was a message from his older sister, Olivia, who lived in London and whom he respected more than anyone in the world. Robert, I just saw the videos. What have you become? Mom would be ashamed. That phrase hit him harder than any internet comment. His mother had passed away 5 years ago, a humble woman who had cleaned houses to pay for his education. She had been like Sarah, hard-working, dignified, self-sacrificing. For the first time in years, Robert Sterling cried. As dawn broke the next day, the city awoke to the story in all the headlines. Millionaire humiliates child genius and refuses to pay. Ethan, the 11-year-old who solved the impossible. Justice for Ethan. Thousands demand businessman keep his word. At the school where Ethan had studied, Mr. Harrison arrived early as always. A colleague stopped him in the hallway, showing him the video on his phone. Harrison, isn't that your student, Ethan Miller? The teacher adjusted his glasses, looking at the screen. His eyes filled with tears when he saw his former student solving the puzzles with the same concentration he showed in class. It's him, he whispered. I knew he was brilliant. But this is extraordinary. Why did he leave school? Such talent? Family problems. His father had an accident. They needed money. I tried to get him scholarships, but the procedures are slow, and the need was urgent. The teacher sat at his desk, an idea forming in his mind. He picked up his phone and began making calls. If that businessman wasn't going to do the right thing, he would make sure Ethan received the opportunities he deserved in other ways. At Sterling Holdings, the atmosphere was tense from the moment the first employee arrived. Emily had been one of the first to enter, encountering a crowd of journalists at the building's entrance. Is it true your boss humiliated a child? Is he going to keep his promise? Where is Mr. Sterling? She navigated through the cameras without commenting, but her heart raced. She had never seen anything like it. The building's reception seemed like a media war zone. Mr. Thompson was already in his office when she arrived. The accountant looked tired, as if he hadn't slept either. Emily, this has gotten out of control, he said without preamble. I just received calls from 3 major clients asking if they should cancel contracts. Seriously? Seriously. The company's image is in total crisis, all because of one man's arrogance. Do you think he'll pay? Mr. Thompson sighed deeply. I've known Robert for 20 years. He's proud, stubborn, sometimes cruel, but he's not stupid. Eventually, he'll see he has no choice. At 9 a.m., Robert arrived at the building wearing dark glasses and a cap, trying to go unnoticed. It didn't work. Journalists immediately surrounded him. Mr. Sterling, are you going to keep your promise? What do you say to the people calling for a boycott of your company? Do you regret humiliating Ethan? Robert pushed his way inside without answering, the sound of camera flashes echoing like gunshots in his ears. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his temples. When he reached his office, he found Mr. Thompson waiting for him. We need to talk now. Robert took off his glasses, revealing red, swollen eyes. "Douglas, please, don't start. 3 clients cancelled this morning. 5 others are re-evaluating their business relationship with us. Our subsidiary stocks are falling. Employees are scared of losing their jobs. Why? This is a personal bet. It has nothing to do with the company. It has everything to do with the company when its CEO is the face of that company." Mr. Thompson dropped a folder on the desk. "These are projections from our public relations department. If you don't resolve this in 48 hours, we could lose up to 30% of our client base." Robert opened the folder, his hands trembling. The numbers were terrifying, worse than any financial crisis he had faced. "There's more," Mr. Thompson continued. "I received a call from the workers' union. They are considering a strike in solidarity with Ethan. They say, if you treat a child like that, how do you treat your employees? This is ridiculous. The world has gone mad. No, Robert, the world is reacting to an obvious injustice. You publicly humiliated a vulnerable child. You bet something you didn't want to lose, and now you refuse to keep your word. People aren't stupid." Robert slumped into his chair, looking at the safe that was still open on his desk. Those damned bearer bonds gleamed under the morning light. "Do you know what the worst part is?" Mr. Thompson asked, his voice softening. "That child, with every reason in the world to hate you, isn't giving interviews, isn't speaking ill of you. He's just waiting for you to keep your word." Meanwhile, in the small apartment of the Miller family, journalists were also camped outside. But Sarah had flatly refused to let Ethan talk to them. "This is not a circus," she had said firmly when a reporter knocked on the door. "My son is a child, not a spectacle." Sarah's phone hadn't stopped ringing either. Calls from television shows wanting to interview Ethan, lawyers offering free representation, even Hollywood producers asking about story rights. "I don't know what to do," Sarah confessed to David while Ethan slept in his small room. "All this is too much." "Let's keep things simple," David replied, stroking his wife's hand. Robert made a promise. Either he keeps it or he doesn't. Everything else is noise. A different knock on the door startled them. It wasn't the aggressive knock of journalists, but something softer, almost timid. David opened it and found Mr. Harrison standing there with a folder under his arm. "Mr. Harrison?" Sarah approached, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk about Ethan's future." The teacher entered when invited. "I saw the videos. I saw what my student can do." They sat at the small kitchen table, the only flat surface they had in the apartment. "Mr. Harrison opened his folder. "I contacted 5 private educational institutions, 3 universities as well. All are willing to offer full scholarships to Ethan if he returns to school." Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, tears instantly welling up. "But there's something else," Mr. Harrison continued. "The Canadian Institute of Technology wants to evaluate him. They think he might qualify for a special program for gifted students." "Gifted students?" David repeated. "Children with exceptional cognitive abilities, mathematics, science, logic. Ethan has the perfect profile. He could receive advanced education, mentorship with university professors, access to resources that normally only graduate students have. But that costs money," Sarah said, her hope beginning to fade. "We can't. The scholarships cover everything: tuition, materials, even transportation and meals. And if Mr. Sterling keeps his promise..." Mr. Harrison let the sentence hang. "If he keeps it," David repeated bitterly. "That's the problem, isn't it?" Ethan appeared at the door of his room, awakened by the voices. When he saw Mr. Harrison, his eyes lit up in a way Sarah hadn't seen in years. "Mr. Harrison, Ethan, my boy, I'm so proud of you." Mr. Harrison stood up and hugged his former student. "You proved exactly what I always knew, that your mind is brilliant." "Do you really think so?" "I know it, and I'm not the only one. There are many people who want to help you develop your talent." For the first time since the bet, Ethan genuinely smiled. At 3 p.m., Robert called an emergency meeting with all department heads. The conference room was full, the air thick with tension and rumors. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert began, his voice sounding tired, "you are aware of the situation. I need to know the real impact on our operations." The head of human resources spoke first. "Sir, we have received 20 resignations this morning alone. Employees saying they don't want to work for someone who treats children like that." The head of sales continued. "We lost the contract with Garcia Distributors, $30 million annually. They said they cannot associate with our current image." The marketing director added, "Social media is against us. Hashtags like #Justice for Ethan and #Robert Sterling the Cruel are trending nationally. Some brands are removing our products from their catalogs. Each report was like a physical blow to Robert. He observed the faces around the table. Some showed barely disguised satisfaction, others genuine concern. None showed the respect they used to have for him. Emily, who had been silently taking notes, finally spoke. "Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, there is an obvious solution to all of this, which is, fulfill your promise publicly with humility. Turn this into a story of redemption instead of one of cruelty." Robert looked at her for a long time. "Are you telling me to humiliate myself publicly?" "I'm telling you to do the right thing," Emily replied without lowering her gaze. "Pride is not worth what you are losing, Mr. Thompson stood up. "Robert, I'm going to tell you something that perhaps no one else has the courage to say. Your mother cleaned houses so you could study. She worked on her knees washing floors so you could wear a tie. And now you are disparaging a woman who does exactly the same for her son." The silence in the room was absolute. No one dared to breathe. "Sarah is your mother 30 years ago," Mr. Thompson continued. "Ethan, you are yourself at 11, with a talent that needs opportunity. The difference is that your mother found people who respected her. Are you going to be the one to take that opportunity away from another child?" Robert felt as if the air had been knocked out of his lungs. He had never made that connection, but now that Mr. Thompson put it into words, it was impossible to ignore. "I need time to think," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "You don't have time," the CFO intervened. "Tomorrow is the deadline for 3 important contracts. All of them said they are waiting to see how you resolve this before signing. We are talking about $200 million at stake." Robert looked up sharply. $200 million? Yes. So the real question is, are you going to lose $200 million for not paying $100? The irony was brutal and perfect. Robert had bet $100 million thinking he would never lose. Now losing those $100 million could save him $200. But beyond the numbers, something else began to weigh on his conscience. The image of his mother on her knees cleaning floors. The image of Sarah doing exactly the same. The image of Ethan with that brilliant talent hidden behind patched clothes and chapped hands. "I want to talk to the boy," he finally said. "Arrange a private meeting. Just him, his mother, and me." Emily nodded. "I'll try, sir, but I don't know if they will accept. Let them know I want to apologize. Truly." For the first time in days, something like hope appeared on the faces of his employees. Maybe, just maybe, their boss wasn't completely lost. The question was, would it be enough? Or was the damage already irreparably done? Outside, journalists were still waiting. Cameras were still rolling. The world was still watching. And in a small apartment in the outskirts, an old boy simply waited for an adult to keep his word. The meeting was scheduled for the next day at 5 p.m. in a neutral room, the office of Notary Public Mr. Richard Vega, a 70-year-old man with an impeccable reputation in the city. Emily had suggested the location so that both parties would feel safe, away from the cameras and media chaos. Sarah had spent the previous night sleepless, tossing and turning in her small bed while David snored softly beside her. Should they trust Robert? Was this another humiliation disguised as reconciliation? What if she brought Ethan, and things got worse? "We have to go," David had told her that morning as they had toast with weak coffee. "If we don't go, we'll always wonder what would have happened. Besides, Ethan deserves to hear what that man has to say." Ethan was unusually quiet as they prepared. He had put on his best clothes, a pair of pants he only wore for special occasions, and a shirt Sarah had ironed 3 times until it was perfect. The boy looked at himself in the small, cracked bathroom mirror, running his hands through his hair, trying to tame his unruly curls. "You look very handsome, my love," Sarah told him from the doorway, her voice cracking slightly. "Mom, do you think he really wants to apologize?" Sarah knelt in front of her son, taking his small hands in hers. "I don't know, Ethan. But what I do know is that no matter what happens today, you proved something that no one can take away from you, that you are brilliant, brave, and worthy of respect. And if he doesn't keep his promise, then we move on. Mr. Harrison already got those scholarships. Your future doesn't depend on that man. It depends on you." Ethan nodded. But Sarah could see in his eyes that a part of him still hoped Robert would do the right thing. That childlike hope, that belief that adults eventually keep their word, broke Sarah's heart because she knew the world didn't always work that way. Robert arrived at the notary's office 30 minutes early, accompanied only by Mr. Thompson. He had rejected the suggestion of bringing lawyers, public relations, specialists, or any other member of his team. This had to be personal. Mr. Vega received them in his traditional office with walls lined with legal books and a mahogany desk that had belonged to his grandfather. The The smell of old paper and ink filled the space, mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee that Vega always kept ready. Mr. Sterling, the notary, greeted him with professional courtesy, but without warmth. "I hope this meeting is productive. That is my wish too," Robert responded, his voice sounding more humble than Mr. Thompson had ever heard him. Robert looked different. He had slept barely 3 hours in 2 days, and it showed. Deep, dark circles, an unshaven beard, a wrinkled suit. He was not the image of the immaculate businessman he always projected. He was simply an exhausted and defeated man. "I have prepared a document," Mr. Vega said, showing several papers, "so that if you reach an agreement, everything is formally registered. This way, we avoid future misunderstandings." Robert nodded, although every word from the notary reminded him of the magnitude of what he had done. A formal agreement with an 1-year-old child because he had been so arrogant that they needed legal protection against him. The sound of the main door startled him. It was 5 o'clock sharp. Sarah, David, and Ethan had arrived. When the two families met in the notary's conference room, the tension was so thick it could almost be touched. Ethan stayed slightly behind his mother, his dark eyes observing Robert with a mixture of curiosity and caution. David leaned on his cane, his jaw clenched. He wanted to hate the man who had humiliated his son, but the expression on Robert's face confused him. He didn't see arrogance now. He saw something akin to shame. "Thank you for coming," Robert said, his voice sounding hoarse. "I know you have no reason to trust me." "No, we don't," David responded directly. "You humiliated my son in front of dozens of people. You made a cruel bet, thinking you would never lose. And when you lost, you tried to back out." Robert lowered his gaze, unable to meet David's eyes. "You are absolutely right." "Then why are we here?" Sarah asked, her voice firm despite the nervousness she felt. "Because I need to tell you something I should have said days ago." Robert looked up, and to everyone's surprise, his eyes were moist. "I'm sorry. I apologize to Ethan, to you, Mrs. Miller, to your family. What I did was unforgivable." The silence that followed was interrupted only by the tick-tock of the antique clock on the notary's wall. Ethan stepped forward, surprising his mother. "Why did you do it? Why were you so mean to me?" The question, asked with the brutal honesty of a child, hit Robert harder than any adult accusation. "Because I am a man who forgot where he came from," Robert replied, his voice breaking. "My mother cleaned houses, Ethan, exactly like your mom. She worked on her knees so I could study, and somewhere along the way, when I became successful, I forgot all that. I started to see people like your mother as less important, as if their work defined their worth." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. She had never expected to hear those words. "When I saw you that day," Robert continued, speaking directly to Ethan, "I only saw a child getting in the way. I didn't see a person with dreams, with talent, with a family that loves him, and that says something terrible about who I had become." "And now?" Ethan asked. "Now you see me? Now I see a child who is smarter than all my executives combined. I see someone who taught me the most important lesson of my life. That character has nothing to do with money or social position." Mr. Thompson, who had been observing in silence, felt a lump in his throat. In 20 years of friendship, he had never seen Robert so vulnerable. Notary Vega cleared his throat softly. "Mr. Sterling, do you wish to formalize an agreement?" Robert slowly stood up, walked to his briefcase, and took out a large envelope. His hands trembled slightly as he placed it on the table in front of Ethan. "These are the bearer bonds," he said. $100 million, just as I promised. They are yours, no conditions, no tricks, no fine print." Ethan looked at the envelope as if it were an alien object. Sarah covered her mouth with both hands, tears running freely. Now David had to sit down, his bad leg trembling with emotion. "But there's something else I want to do," Robert continued. "If you allow me," he took out another document from his briefcase. "I contacted the Canadian Institute of Technology. I want to establish a complete educational fund for Ethan, not just for high school, but for university, master's, doctorate, whatever he wants to study. All paid for." "Why?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You're already giving us the 100 million. You don't have to do anything else." "Yes, I have to," Robert responded firmly. "Because I saw the videos of people commenting about your son. I saw professors saying he's a genius. I saw the potential that I was about to despise. And I want to make sure that talent is not wasted due to lack of resources." "That's very generous," David said, still processing everything. "But why should we trust you?" "You shouldn't," Robert admitted. "That's why Notary Vega will legally register everything. The educational fund will be in an independent trust administered by Mr. Harrison and 2 representatives from the institute. I will have no control over the money, only the obligation to keep it funded. The notary nodded. I can confirm that I have reviewed the documents. They are legally binding and irrevocable. Ethan looked at Robert with an expression the businessman couldn't decipher. It wasn't gratitude exactly, but something more complex. It was a child processing how an adult could be so cruel and then so generous. Mr. Sterling, Ethan spoke in a clear voice. Are you really sorry, or are you just afraid of what people are saying? The question was devastatingly direct. Everyone in the room stood still, waiting for the answer. Robert knelt to be at Ethan's height, something he would never normally do. Both, he admitted with brutal honesty. I'm afraid of losing my company like this, but I'm also truly sorry because I saw old photos of my mother cleaning houses, and I realized I was treating you the way others probably treated her, and that broke my heart. Your mom also cleaned houses? Ethan asked, his hostility beginning to soften. Yes, for 20 years so I could study and have a better life. And you forgot that? I forgot, and it was the worst mistake of my life. Ethan looked at his mother for guidance. Sarah nodded, almost imperceptibly, giving him permission to make his own decision. I accept your apology, Ethan finally said, and I accept the money because you promised it, and we need it. But I want you to know something. What is it? That I will never forget where I come from. No matter how much money I have, I will always remember that my mom cleaned floors and my dad sold crafts at the markets, because they taught me that honest work is dignified, no matter what it is. Ethan's words resonated in the room like bells. Robert felt tears running down his cheeks, no longer caring to hide them. You are wiser at 11 than I am at 45, he said, his voice breaking. I wish I could go back in time and treat you with the respect you deserved from the beginning. You can't go back in time, Ethan replied with a maturity that contradicted his age. But you can make things right from now on. Sarah finally approached the table, taking the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were the bonds, each certified and validated. $100 million, more money than they had seen in their entire lives combined. This is going to change our lives, she murmured, barely able to believe it was real. It already has. Mr. Thompson spoke for the first time. It changed everything for everyone present. Notary Vega began to prepare the final documents. There were contracts to sign, certifications to validate, seals to stamp. The process took almost an hour, during which the 2 families remained in the room, the air gradually lightening of tension. Mrs. Miller, Robert spoke as they waited for the notary to finish. I want to offer you something else. More? Sarah looked at him with renewed distrust. A real job in my company, not in cleaning, but in human resources, as an employee wellness advisor, someone to ensure that workers are treated with dignity. Sarah blinked, confused. But I don't have the education for that. You have something better than education. Experience. You know what it feels like to be invisible, to be belittled. That makes you perfect for the position, and we will pay for any training you need. David squeezed his wife's hand. It's your decision, love. Sarah looked at Robert for a long time, searching for signs of deceit or manipulation, but what she saw was sincerity. Tired, imperfect, but real. I'll think about it, she finally said. But if I accept, it will be because I want to do that job well, not out of charity. I wouldn't expect anything less, Robert responded. When the documents were finally ready, the notary presented them one by one. Transfer of bonds, establishment of the educational trust, terms of Sarah's potential employment. Everything signed, sealed, certified. It's done, Mr. Vega announced. Everything is official and legally binding. Ethan was now officially the owner of $100 million. His education was guaranteed to whatever level he wished to reach. His mother had a real job offer that could change her family's trajectory. May I say something? Mr. Thompson asked for permission. When everyone nodded, he continued. I have worked with Robert for 20 years. I have seen him at his worst and his best, but I have never seen him learn a lesson as important as this. What lesson? Ethan asked. That true success is not measured in money, but in how we treat people, especially those who cannot defend themselves. Robert nodded, unable to speak due to the lump in his throat. When they left the notary's office, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with oranges and pinks. Outside, a small group of journalists still waited, but they kept a respectful distance thanks to the security guards Mr. Vega had hired. Are you going to make statements? One of the reporters shouted. Robert looked at Sarah, who nodded. Together, with Ethan between them, they walked toward the cameras. Today, justice was served, Robert said into the microphones. I fulfilled my promise to Ethan and his family. But more importantly, I learned that I had forgotten my roots and lost my moral compass. That child taught me more in a week than I learned in 20 years of business. How do you feel, Ethan? A reporter asked. Ethan thought for a moment before answering. I'm happy that he kept his word, and I hope other adults also learn to keep their promises. The cameras captured that moment. And 1 year. Old boy standing between his family and a repentant businessman, teaching the world about integrity. That night, the reconciliation videos became even more viral than the original humiliation videos. But this time the comments were different. Faith in humanity restored. This child is the future of our country. Robert Sterling showed that people can change. Sarah and David raised an exceptional son. In their small apartment, the Miller family sat together at their only table, the bonds stored in an envelope that Sarah had hidden in the safest place she knew, inside her mattress. What are we going to do with all that money? David asked, still processing. First, pay all our debts, Sarah said practically. Second, get a better place to live. Third, make sure Ethan has everything he needs for his studies. And then, Ethan asked. Then, live with dignity, never forgetting where we came from. As I promised Mr. Sterling, Ethan added. Exactly as you promised him. In his penthouse, Robert looked at the city lights, but this time with different feelings. He had lost $100 million, had almost lost his company, had been publicly humiliated, but he had gained something he didn't know he needed. A second chance to be the person his mother had raised, the person who respected honest work, who valued character over money, who understood that everyone deserved dignity. His phone rang. It was his sister Olivia from London. I saw today's videos, she said. Mom would be proud. Those 4 words were worth more than any fortune. The story had taken a turn no one expected, but it wasn't over yet. The true impact of everything that had happened was just beginning to reveal itself. Dawn broke differently for the Miller family. For the first time in years, Sarah woke up without the knot of anxiety in her stomach, wondering how they would pay the bills that month. The sunlight streamed through the small window of their apartment, but everything seemed brighter, as if the world itself had changed color. David was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, looking at the documents the notary had given them. His hands, calloused from years of hard labor, trembled slightly as he turned the pages again and again, as if he needed to confirm that everything was real. Couldn't sleep? Sarah approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. I was thinking about everything we can do now, David replied, his voice laden with contained emotion. Get my leg operated on. Get a place where Ethan has his own room. Buy medicines without having to choose which ailment we treat this month. Sarah sat beside him, intertwining her fingers with his. We'll do all that, but slowly, with wisdom. Do you know what excites me most? David looked at her with bright eyes. That Ethan will have the opportunities we never had. He'll study, he'll develop that incredible talent he has. He'll be someone great. He already is someone great, Sarah corrected gently. Yesterday, he taught a millionaire what it means to have dignity. That's already greater than any university degree. Ethan appeared at the door of his small room, still in pajamas, with sleep-tousled hair. Mom, Dad, did everything that happened yesterday really happen, or did I dream it? Sarah extended her arms, and her son ran into them. The 3 hugged in the tiny kitchen, letting tears of relief and happiness flow freely. It really happened, my love, Sarah whispered against her son's hair. And now everything is going to change. In the weeks that followed, the change was evident on multiple fronts. The Miller family moved to a modest but dignified apartment in a safe neighborhood. It wasn't a palace, but it had 3 bedrooms, reliable hot water, and a small area where Ethan could study without sharing space with everyone else. On moving day, Ethan couldn't stop running from room to room, amazed to have his own space. Mom, look, I have a desk, he shouted from his new bedroom, where Sarah had placed a simple wooden desk and a lamp for him to do homework. David underwent the surgery he had needed since the accident. The procedure was successful, and although he still required physical therapy, doctors assured him he would eventually walk without a cane. The first time he took steps without support, with Sarah and Ethan watching. All 3 cried with joy. Sarah accepted the position at Sterling Holdings, but not before establishing clear conditions. I don't want special treatment, she had told Robert in their first formal meeting. I want to really work, really learn, and earn the respect of the employees. I wouldn't expect anything less, Robert had responded, and this time his smile was genuine. Sarah's first day in her new role was intimidating. She arrived 2 hours early, reviewing over and over the professional uniform she had bought with part of the money. A simple but dignified suit, comfortable but formal shoes. Emily had greeted her with a warm smile. "Welcome to the team, Sarah, but now as a colleague, not as a cleaning employee. I still find it hard to believe," Sarah admitted. "Believe it and get ready because Robert wants you to oversee an important project." The project turned out to be the creation of an employee wellness program for all entry-level employees. Better hours, subsidized medical care, training opportunities. Sarah worked alongside human resources specialists, providing the invaluable perspective of someone who had been on the other side. "We need to include support for single parents," she suggested in a meeting, remembering the times she had had to choose between going to work or caring for Ethan when he was sick. "Excellent point," the head of human resources noted. "What else have you observed that we could improve?" To Sarah's surprise, her voice mattered. Her ideas were heard, implemented, valued, not out of charity, but because they had real merit. Ethan, for his part, began the gifted student program at the Canadian Institute of Technology. The first day was overwhelming. The other children in the program came from affluent families, with parents who were university professors or scientists. Ethan was the only one who had learned advanced mathematics while helping his mother clean offices. "I don't belong here," he told Sarah that night with tears of frustration. "The other kids talk about books I've never read, places I've never visited." Sarah sat next to him on his new bed, stroking his hair. "Ethan, who opened a safe that executives with master's degrees couldn't open?" "I did," the boy murmured. "And who taught those arrogant adults about humility and dignity?" "I did." "Then you do belong there. You just have different experiences, not inferior ones. Your experiences make you unique." Mr. Harrison, who now formally supervised Ethan's education as part of the trust, constantly reinforced that message. "Your perspective is valuable precisely because it's different," he would say. "You see problems that others don't see because you have lived realities that they only read about in books." Gradually, Ethan began to find his place. When a classmate struggled with algebra, Ethan explained it using real-life examples, not abstract formulas. When social problems were discussed in class, Ethan provided insights that only someone who had experienced poverty could give. "It's fascinating to work with him," the program director told Mr. Harrison during an evaluation. "He has exceptional mathematical intelligence, yes, but also an emotional intelligence that we rarely see in children his age. He's had to grow up fast," Mr. Harrison responded with contained pride. "Difficulties can destroy or strengthen. In Ethan's case, they strengthened him." Robert, meanwhile, faced his own transformation. The media crisis had become an unexpected opportunity for real change. After keeping his promise to Ethan, he began to examine all his company's practices with new eyes. "How much do we pay the cleaning staff?" he asked in an executive meeting, surprising everyone with the question. "The legal minimum wage," replied the head of human resources. "And do you think that's enough to live with dignity?" An uncomfortable silence filled the room. No one had questioned that before. "I want you to review the salaries of all entry-level employees," Robert ordered. "Cleaning, security, maintenance, cafeteria, everyone. And I want to raise them to a level where a person can support a family without having to work 3 jobs. "Sir, that's going to cost millions," protested the CFO. "And we're going to do it anyway. Budget for the increase next quarter." Mr. Thompson, who observed from his usual spot, smiled discreetly. The man he had known 20 years ago was returning, but improved by the lessons learned. News of the change at Sterling Holdings spread quickly. Other companies began to question their own practices. Some did so genuinely, others just for public relations. But the effect was the same. The national conversation about labor dignity and fair wages had been reignited. Robert was invited to give a talk at a business leadership conference. He accepted, nervous, but determined to share what he had learned. "For 20 years, I built an empire." He began his presentation to hundreds of entrepreneurs, but I forgot to build my humanity. And one year-old child reminded me of something my mother taught me decades ago, that every person deserves respect, regardless of their job or bank account. The audience listened in absolute silence. When I humiliated Ethan Miller, I not only disrespected him, I disrespected his mother, who works harder than I have ever worked. I disrespected all honest workers who keep our businesses running, and I disrespected myself, forgetting where I come from. His voice cracked slightly, but he continued, "I share this not to clean up my image, but because I believe many of us have forgotten the same lesson. It's easy to see numbers on spreadsheets and forget that each number represents a person with a family, dreams, dignity." After the conference, several entrepreneurs approached, some to criticize him for weakness, others to thank him for expressing what they too had begun to feel. My grandfather started as a factory worker, one CEO confessed. I built this company on his sacrifice, but at some point, I forgot that. Your story reminded me that I need to reconnect with those values. One afternoon, Emily knocked on Robert's office door with a serious expression. Sir, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but I think you should receive him. Who is it? Ethan Miller. Robert immediately stood up. Send him in. Ethan entered the office, now dressed in the Canadian Institute of Technology uniform, carrying a backpack full of books. He looked different from the last time he had been there, more confident, happier, but still with that humility that characterized him. Mr. Sterling, he greeted formally. I hope I'm not bothering you. Not at all. Ethan, please, sit down. Would you like something to drink? No, thank you. I just came to give you something. The boy took a carefully organized folder from his backpack. Inside was a school project, a complex mathematical analysis on resource allocation in corporations. I did this project on your company, Ethan explained. My professor asked me to analyze a real organization, and I thought of Sterling Holdings. Robert browsed the project, impressed by the depth of the analysis. This is incredibly detailed. I found some areas where you could improve efficiency, Ethan pointed to certain pages, especially in the distribution of the budget for employee training. With the mathematical models I learned, I calculated that investing 15% more in training could increase productivity by 25% in 2 years. Robert read the projections, fascinated. The analysis was sophisticated, backed by solid data and impeccable mathematics. Can I keep this? He asked. I'd like to show it to my strategic planning team. That's why I brought it. Ethan smiled. I thought maybe it would be useful to you. Ethan, Robert closed the folder, looking directly at the boy. May I ask you something personal? Of course. Did you truly forgive me? Or did you just say yes because it was polite? Ethan thought carefully before responding with that maturity that continued to surprise everyone. At first, I didn't know if I had forgiven you. I was confused and hurt. But my mom told me something important. What did she tell you? That forgiving doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means choosing not to let it make you bitter. You hurt me, yes, but you also kept your word, and you're trying to be better. That deserves recognition. You are wiser than most adults I know. I only learned from good people, Ethan shrugged. My mom, my dad, Mr. Harrison, they taught me that everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is how we respond afterward. Robert felt the familiar sting of tears, but he was no longer ashamed. Thank you, Ethan, for giving me a second chance to make things right. Thank you for taking it. When Ethan left, Robert remained looking at the project on his desk. And one year, old boy had done an analysis that rivaled consultants who charged millions. But more than that, that child had taught him something no consultant could. That true leadership does not come from authority, but from character. The story was far from over, but it had already changed lives in ways no one could have predicted. The months transformed not only the directly involved individuals, but the entire community. The story of Ethan and Robert had become something larger than themselves, a symbol that genuine change was possible. The employee wellness program Sarah helped design became a model for other companies. Business magazines wrote articles about the Ethan effect, as they began to call it. The idea that treating employees with dignity was not only morally correct but economically intelligent. Turnover rates are down 40%. Mr. Thompson showed Robert the quarterly reports. Productivity increased. And look at this. Job applications tripled. People want to work for a company that values them. All thanks to a child who taught me what I had forgotten, Robert responded. Looking out the window at the city he once dominated with arrogance and now tried to serve with humility. At the Canadian Institute of Technology, Ethan not only excelled academically, but had become a mentor to other students. When a new student arrived, a shy child from a low-income family, Ethan was the first to approach. Is it your first day? He asked with genuine kindness. The child nodded nervously. I don't know if I should be here. Everyone seems so smart. I thought the same thing when I first got here. Ethan sat next to him. Do you know what I learned? That being smart has nothing to do with where you come from. It has to do with never stopping learning. Really, truly. Besides, everyone here is learning. No one was born knowing differential equations. Mr. Harrison observed the scene from his office door with a proud smile. Ethan had not only developed his extraordinary mathematical talent, but had maintained that humility and empathy that made him special. During a school ceremony where Ethan received an award for academic excellence, he asked permission to say a few words. With the auditorium full of students, parents, and teachers, the 1-1-year. Old boy stood in front of the microphone. "This award is important to me," he began, his voice firm, despite his nervousness, but not for the reasons everyone thinks. The auditorium fell silent. "It's not important because it shows I'm smart. It's important because it shows that where you come from doesn't determine where you can go." Ethan looked for his parents in the audience. Sarah had tears streaming down her cheeks. David held her hand, standing without his cane for the first time at a school ceremony. "A while ago, my mom cleaned floors so I could eat. My dad sold crafts at the markets to buy medicine, and I helped them because that's what families do. They support each other." Several parents in the audience looked at each other, some with uncomfortable expressions as they remembered their own prejudices. "Someone humiliated me for that," Ethan continued without bitterness, only with honesty. "They made me feel small because my clothes were patched and my hands were dirty from cleaning. But that experience taught me something valuable." "What did it teach you?" a child asked from the audience, breaking protocol, but expressing what everyone wanted to know. "It taught me that dignity doesn't come from the outside, it comes from within. My mom always had dignity, even when she was on her knees cleaning. My dad always had dignity, even when people walked past him without seeing him. And I always had worth, even when others couldn't see it." The auditorium erupted in applause. It wasn't the polite applause of school ceremonies, but something deeper, the recognition of a truth that resonated with everyone. When Ethan stepped off the stage, he was intercepted by the institute director. "That was the most impactful speech I've heard in 30 years of education," she told him with bright eyes. "I can share it on our official channels. Only if you promise that the message reaches other children who think they're not enough," Ethan responded. "I promise." The video of Ethan's speech went viral again, this time for entirely different reasons than the first ones. The comments were overwhelmingly positive. "This child is 11 years old and has more wisdom than most adults. His mom and dad raised an exceptional human being. I cried when he talked about dignity. My mother also cleaned houses. We need more stories like this in the world." Robert saw the video in his office, and for the umpteenth time since meeting Ethan, he cried. But these were different tears, not of shame or regret, but of deep gratitude for having had the opportunity to learn from someone so special. Emily entered his office and found him wiping his eyes. "Did you see Ethan's video?" "I did. That child is extraordinary." "He is. And in part, he's extraordinary because you gave him the opportunity to shine." "No," Robert corrected her. "I almost destroyed that opportunity. It was his mother, his father, Mr. Harrison, and above all, his own character, that made him shine. I just had the luck of being taught something in the process. But you learned and changed. That also counts." Robert thought for a moment. "Emily, I want to do something else." "What is it?" "I want to create a foundation for children, like Ethan. Children with extraordinary talent, but no resources. I don't want anyone else to have to wait for an arrogant businessman to make a cruel bet to get their opportunity." Emily smiled broadly. "That would be incredible. What would you call it?" "The Dignity Foundation. Because that's what I learned, that everyone deserves the opportunity to develop their potential with dignity." On a special afternoon, Robert invited the Miller family to his office for a meeting, but when they arrived, they found the conference room full of people. Mr. Thompson, Emily, Mr. Harrison, company employees, even some reporters. "What's happening?" Sarah asked, confused. "I wanted everyone to be here for this announcement," Robert explained, "because everyone was part of this transformation." He pressed a button on the remote, and a presentation appeared on the large screen. The Dignity Foundation read the title. "With the support of Mr. Harrison and the supervision of Mr. Thompson, we have created an educational foundation." Robert began to explain. "Its mission is to identify and support children with exceptional talent who lack economic resources." And the presentation showed the complete plan: school scholarships, mentorship programs, comprehensive family support. "But there's something else," Robert continued, looking directly at Ethan. "We need a youth director for the foundation. Someone who understands what these children experience because they lived it themselves. Someone who can be an example and a mentor." "A youth director?" Ethan asked, confused. "You, Ethan, we want you to be the face of this foundation, to tell your story, to help identify other brilliant children, to show them that change is possible." Ethan looked at his parents for guidance. Sarah had her hands over her mouth, crying again. David nodded vigorously, his own tears falling freely. "But I'm 11 years old," Ethan pointed out the obvious. "And that's exactly what makes your perspective valuable," Mr. Harrison intervened. "Children will trust you in a way they would never trust adults." "You don't have to decide now," Robert added. "Take all the time you need. but I want you to know that your story has already changed many lives. Imagine how many more you could impact." That night, in their apartment, which was no longer small or desperate, but warm and full of hope, the Miller family sat together in the living room. "What do you think, son?" David asked Ethan. "I think it's a lot of responsibility," Ethan admitted. "But I also think about all the children who are where I was, cleaning with their moms, feeling invisible, believing they're not enough. And, what do you want to tell them?" Sarah asked softly. "That they are enough, that their worth doesn't depend on their clothes or their money, that intelligence and talent can be anywhere, even in places where people don't think to look." David hugged his son. "Then, you know your answer. Yes, I want to do it. I want to help." The official launch of the Dignity Foundation was an event that garnered national attention. The hall was packed with entrepreneurs, educators, community leaders, and media. But the most impactful moment came when Ethan took the podium. "My name is Ethan Miller," he began, his voice amplified by the microphones, but his message amplified by authenticity. "And months ago, I was cleaning floors in a corporate building." He narrated his story without unnecessary dramatism, only with pure honesty. He spoke about his mother working tirelessly, his father selling crafts despite the pain, his own struggle to maintain hope when everything seemed impossible. "Someone humiliated me," he said without naming Robert directly, but that humiliation became an opportunity. Not because humiliation is good, but because people can choose to learn and change. Robert, sitting in the front row, felt every word as a reminder of how far he had come and how far he still had to go. "This foundation exists so that other children don't have to wait for a humiliation to receive their opportunity," Ethan continued. "It exists to tell them that their talent matters, their future matters, they matter." The applause was deafening, but more important than the applause were the tears on the faces of mothers who cleaned houses, fathers who worked in construction, children who saw themselves in Ethan's story. After the event, a woman timidly approached Sarah. "Mrs. Miller, I clean houses too. My son is 10 years old and he's very good with numbers. Can this foundation really help him?" Sarah took the woman's hands in hers. "Yes, it really can. Give me his details. I will personally make sure he is evaluated." Because Sarah had accepted another role in the foundation, Community Outreach Coordinator. Who better than someone who had lived that reality to connect with families who were living it now? On a quiet afternoon, Ethan and Robert met again in the office where everything had begun. The safe was still there, now empty, but kept as a reminder. "Do you know what the most ironic thing about all this is?" Robert asked Ethan. "What is it?" "That I bet $100 million thinking it was impossible for me to lose. I lost those $100 million, but I gained something worth much more." "What did you gain?" "I gained my humanity back. I gained the respect of my employees, I gained purpose, and I gained a friend who constantly teaches me how to be a better person." Ethan smiled. "I also gained important things." "Like what?" "I learned that justice sometimes does exist. I learned that people can change if they truly want to. And I learned that my voice matters, even when I'm the smallest in the room." "Your voice always mattered, Ethan. I was just too arrogant to listen at first." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out the window at the city spreading below. "Mr. Sterling," Ethan broke the silence. "There's something I never asked you. What is it? What would have happened if I hadn't been able to open the safe? Would you really have humiliated me more?" Robert sighed deeply. "Honestly, I don't know. The man I was at that moment probably would have, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out, because by losing that bet, I gained the opportunity to become someone better. Everyone deserves second chances," Ethan said with wisdom that belied his 11 years. "Yes, and thank you for giving me mine." The first anniversary of the day Ethan opened the safe was commemorated in a special way. The Dignity Foundation had awarded full scholarships to 50 children in its first year. 23 companies had adopted Sterling Holdings' employee wellness model. Sarah had helped 30 families access educational resources, and Ethan, now 12 years old, was still the same humble boy, but with a confidence that came from knowing who he was and where he came from. At the anniversary ceremony, he was asked to say the final words. He walked to the podium, looked at his mother and father in the audience, at Robert, who watched him with paternal pride, at Mr. Harrison, who had supported him from the beginning. "A year ago," Ethan began, "a man offered me $100 million if I could open a safe. He thought he was making a cruel joke. He didn't know he was opening something much more important." He paused, letting his words resonate. "I didn't just open a safe that day. I opened a conversation about dignity, about respect, about the value of every person, regardless of their job or background. And that conversation changed lives, including mine. I learned that the real treasure was never in those bearer bonds. The real treasure is in the opportunities I now have, in the education I receive, in knowing that my family is well, in being able to help other children have the same opportunities. Ethan looked directly at the cameras broadcasting live to every child watching me. If someone makes you feel small because of your clothes, because of your home, because of your parents' work, I want you to remember something. Your worth is not defined by another person. It is defined by you with your actions, your character, your heart. To every adult watching me, never underestimate someone by their appearance. The next genius, the next leader, the next person to change the world could be cleaning your office, selling crafts on the street, or serving your coffee. Treat them with the dignity they deserve. Tears streamed down faces throughout the auditorium. And finally, Ethan concluded, his voice firm and clear, I want to thank the person who unintentionally gave me the opportunity to show who I am. Mr. Sterling, thank you for keeping your promise. But more importantly, thank you for having the courage to change. You taught me that it's never too late to be the person we should have been from the beginning. The auditorium rose to a standing ovation. Robert wept openly, unashamed, as he applauded the child who had transformed his life. Sarah hugged David, both crying tears of joy, pride, and gratitude for the impossible path that had brought them to this moment. Mr. Thompson, from his seat, thought about how an 11-year-old boy had done more to change corporate culture than decades of consultants and seminars. Mr. Harrison smiled, knowing that his intuition about Ethan's talent had been correct, but that the child had exceeded even his highest expectations. And in homes across the country, mothers who cleaned houses hugged their children tighter. Fathers who worked humble jobs sat straighter. Children who felt invisible began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they too had worth. Because if a child in threadbare shoes with patched clothes could open a safe that defeated executives, if he could teach humility to a millionaire, if he could change the national conversation about dignity and respect, then anything was possible. And that was the true fortune Ethan found that day. Not $100 million, but the understanding that his voice mattered, his story had power, and his existence made a difference in the world. The safe had only been the beginning. The real treasure was the change it generated in hearts, minds, and lives.